Cheers. Welcome to today's lecture on problem solving. We're going to cover a few different topics today. We're going to start with, in this first part, understanding the definition of exactly what a problem is. So when you've got a problem, what are the different parts? What are the components that make up this problem? And also, what are the different types of problems? We're going to look also at the psychological study of problems. So problem solving might seem a little bit of an abstract concept, so we'll try to understand how have psychologists tried to study this scientifically. We're also going to look in the third part at problem representation. So this refers to the way that you go about coming up with a mental representation and coming up with strategies for solving problems. And we're going to spend a lot of time focusing on the benefits and the perils of past experience. So you might think that past experience of solving problems is going to be really useful for helping you solve current problems. And in many cases, yes, that's true. But you also find if the current problem that you're working on, if the solution or the approach that you need to take to come to the solution, if that differs in any significant way from the way that you're used to solving problems, we have a really hard time working that out. So we'll look at why past experience is important. We're also going to understand how we can use analogies. So sometimes you might see how a problem has been solved in a different domain. We'll understand how knowledge of this can be useful to transfer to helping you solve problems in the current domain. Finally, in the last part, we'll look at some of the research on insight, and particularly the stages that we can go through from having no idea, so no understanding of what the solution is, to how do you actually come to have insight, that kind of eureka moment of, yes, I've arrived at a solution here. So let's begin with a problem, and this is the kind of problem that many of you might face right now. So I'm recording this, it's April 2020, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, we're in Bangkok right now, and what I want you to imagine is that, let's just hope this is hypothetical and you don't have to do it. Let's imagine that you need to take a train across town for an emergency dentist appointment. So you've got this really bad toothache and you need to be at the dentist in 1 hour's time. Now, because we're in the middle of this pandemic, there's restrictions and they won't let you on public transport, so they won't let you on the train unless you're wearing a face mask. Okay, so far. Now, unfortunately, you don't have a face mask. So we have a problem, and we need to find a solution. Have a think about what would be your solution to this problem at the moment. So you could probably, if you're trying to come up in your mind right now, what are the things that I can do? Depending on the access that you have to different resources, is going to determine how much of a problem this is. So you could solve this in a number of different ways. You could try and find somewhere to buy a mask. If that doesn't work, if you don't think it's easy enough to do, you could find someone who's going to be able to lend you a mask. You could alternatively home fashion. So you could get the sewing equipment and make your own fancy mask. It's probably not going to do too much to actually protect you, but it's at least going to get you on the BTS. And in doing this, coming up with these different sorts of solutions, the kinds of stages that you would probably go through is maybe speaking to other people. You would be searching through kind of general knowledge of thinking about where are the places that sell a mask? Is there anywhere that I've got one kind of tucked around in the house? You might consult the internet. So you go on Google and you look at possible solutions for this. So whatever it is, we're generally, when we're coming up with a solution, this can be discovered, or we can come to it through searching our memory, consultation with others. We can also examine different parameters of the problem. So for example, you could consider making a change to, rather than the fact that you need to take the train from your house towards the dentist, you could change the parameters and think that, yeah, maybe I can take a taxi instead. And through all of this, there may not be one single best solution. So it might be the case that these different options that you've got have got different pros and cons. Some are going to, right now, expose you to more risk. Some are going to take less or more time, etc. So generally the solution we come to, not necessarily going to be the best one. They're going to have different pros and cons. So we know that most problems have several different features or aspects that define them as a problem. And I think a good working definition of a problem is the idea that you have a current state that you're in and a desired goal state that you want to get to, and there is some gap or barrier that's preventing you easily moving from this current state into this desired goal state. On the figure that I've presented here, so this illustrates 5 possible parts of a problem. So again, we're going to suggest that all of them have this current state, all of them have an obstacle, and all of them have some goal state. In the current example that we just talked about, the current state is that you're at home. The goal state is getting to the dentist's on time. So for your 9 a.m. appointment, say. And in the previous example, the problem or obstacle that we've got is that there is something impeding this progression from us being at home to getting to the dentist. So in this case, the fact that we don't have a mask, that we can't get on the train, is a particular obstacle that's there. So in addition to having this goal state and the current state, a lot of our problems also have something that are known as givens. You can think of these givens as just being constraints or rules. So things with which we have to work in order to find this solution. So some constraint the problem solver must deal with when they're solving the problem. So these are not constraints or things that are actually causing a problem. They're just the boundaries within which we can actually come up with solutions. So in the example of getting to the dentist, suppose that you live next to the train station and there isn't any taxi service. So Grab taxis, all other taxis have been suspended. In that case, one possible given here would be that you have to use public transportation rather than taking a taxi. So this would place one constraint on the possible solutions that you can get there. We then have means. So these means are all of the different operations that you can use to try and change this original state and move closer to the goal state, and all of the different ways that you can think about the solution. So the cognitive operations, so this would be mental imagery, memory retrieval, searching through Google, etc. Imagining the problem from different perspectives, representing the problem in a different way from how it's posed, etc. And one thing that is really important to notice here is that not all problems we'll think about have clearly defined parts. So whilst I think all of them have a current state, most of them have an obstacle, all of them have a goal state, understanding exactly what are the givens and what are the means, these might not be explicitly apparent for every different scenario. So many video games are also built on the premise of problem solving. So a fundamental component of the game is that you're wandering around having to solve a variety of different problems. And I think this also really hints the fact that we find solving problems an intrinsically rewarding activity. We wouldn't pay money to play games unless we were enjoying it. And one of the clips I'm going to show you now is taken from a video game called Limbo. So this is a 2D platform game that's set in a kind of a very eerie dystopian world where you have to navigate this boy through the environment, full of traps and puzzles, and the occasional terrifying spider that turns up in here as well. So your essential goal throughout this is you're just moving, as with most platform games, you're moving from the left to the right hand side. And in this scene that I'm going to show you, we have to get past a swinging blade. I can tell you, if you've played this game, this is a relatively straightforward problem compared to some of the tasks that are in here. So let's have a look at the clip.
Alright, we see the trap. Oh, I was paying attention to the other guy getting away, and that dude just came out of nowhere and was like, hold this. I'm thinking. Just gotta beat it up? No.
What would you do?
So the trap's already been set. There's nothing over here I could pull and use. If I go in, we're screwed. Thanks, Max. I appreciate the support, you know? There's gotta be some shit. What the Does he have a duck? He don't got no duck.
He ain't got no duck.
So do we go back? Double trap setups. And then a third trap. Well, no. That's not it. We got this. Trying to trick us. We're in there. And then you just pull the rope, you bastards. Freedom! We got this. Oh, what is this now? That's water!
So, in the video game example that we've just seen there, can you think about what the different parts of the problem would be represented in that game? So, what is the current state? What are the obstacles? What is the goal state? What are the givens? What are the means? It's a good point now, just to pause the video and have a think about this yourself. Okay, so after pausing the video, current state, pretty straightforward. That is where your person, the character, this boy is right now. The goal state is, given that we know this is a 2D platform game, we know that we have to keep progressing to the right hand side. It's just we want to get to the right. The obstacle is we have these blades that seem to be here that are kind of swing down. We have givens. These are all of the constraints on the different actions that you could engage in. So knowing that it's a computer game, we learn pretty quickly when we're controlling this character what are the limitations of what he can and he can't do. So in this case with the game, this boy has relatively limited control. He can move left and right, he can jump, he can climb a little bit, he can also push and pull objects. One of the things you'll notice in there that he can't do is duck. So knowing that he can't duck, you have to modify the different solutions that you can come up with. And then the means, how are we going to solve this problem? There's different strategies that you could go through for coming up with a solution. It could be the case that you just check out what happens. And they call this in video game parlance trial and death. And I think as a side note, it's one of the great learning benefits of using video games is that when you're problem solving, you can actually, they permit failure. in a way that isn't tolerated in real life. So you can go and put your character into a situation where they die, then they respawn, and you can try something different. Other means could be you go about representing that particular problem in different ways, or thinking about different solutions to it. So there we go. We've got pretty clear defined problems for our Limbo character. And I'd recommend, if you want a good distraction from what you're doing right now, it's a great game. You can play it on Android. I'm probably about a fifth of the way through on my PlayStation at the moment. Some other great... As well as having these particular parts of problems, whether something is actually technically defined as a problem or not also depends on a few other factors that are largely common sense. So first of all, for something to be a problem, it has to involve some degree of conscious engagement in finding the solution that's there. So if I gave you a simple maths equation of 2 plus 2, the answer automatically comes to you. It's not a problem. Whereas if I give you a more complex one that involves some degree of algebra or trigonometry, and you need to sit down and think about this, then that is a problem. Second, a problem only exists when we don't know the solution or have relevant knowledge to immediately solve it. So in this regard, whether something is a problem or not is relatively subjective and is going to vary across individuals. So if you have a younger sibling, the things that might be problems to them, such as a simple algebra equation, may not be a problem for you. You could look at it and the answer automatically comes to you, whereas for them, they are going to have to consciously think about it. Similarly, if I ask you to determine the quickest route to the airport, if you can just pick out your phone and look at Google Maps and come up with an automated solution, then this is less of a problem than, say, if you didn't have access to these automated solutions. If you had to work it out by actually consciously thinking, this is the time that it would take from getting from A to B, etc., and adding all of these up and consciously thinking about the different parameters, this would be more of a problem. Problems can also be characterized by different descriptors, and particularly how well each of those different parts of the problems are defined. So the start, the goal, and the possible strategies that can be used. So we have well-defined problems, and this is where all aspects of the problem are clearly defined. We know what the initial state is, we know the possible method, so we have clear understanding of the different givens or the different constraints. And the end goal is well specified. There is an achievable target. So a couple of examples might be, if I asked you to find the area of a parallelogram, it's pretty clearly defined, the task that you need to, or the steps that you need to go through in order to achieve that. Similarly, get to the center of a maze. There's a clear start point, which is where you are. There's a clear end point, which is the center of the maze. Whilst it might be difficult to achieve that, these two are absolutely clear, and the means for you doing it is walking along a path and taking left or right direction steps. So there's little ambiguity in terms of what is required. In contrast, we can also have ill-defined problems. So this is where some elements of the problem are underspecified. So it might be the case that the initial state that you're in is unclear, the exact goal is ambiguous, and the methods that you need to use in order to get to this final goal are not necessarily known by you. So some examples of this might be having the goal of finding a fulfilling job. It's very unclear what are the criteria that would underpin. So what are the means that, or the processes that you could go through in order to achieve a fulfilling job is unclear. And when you get to what is meant to be that kind of goal state of the fulfilling job, it's unclear exactly what properties this job needs to possess in order for you to find it fulfilling. Similar, coming up with the objective of becoming happier. Whilst there's a kind of goal state of increased happiness, the exact means in which you go through to do that, and the obstacles are pretty ambiguous on there. Other examples might be if you're troubleshooting your computer. So if you have problems and your computer's acting a bit sluggish and you're trying to work out why that's the case, it's really hard to work out what is the exact obstacle. So what are the exact problems there, and what are the steps that you need to take in order to solve this or to improve it. Another example might be if your goal in academia is to try and obtain a good course grade. It's not really clear what is the initial current state where you're at. So what is your current performance? It's unclear what the goal state is. Yes, it's to get a good grade, but what are the things that you need to do in order to actually achieve that? Problems can then also be characterized by the level of knowledge that is required in order to solve them. So we have knowledge-rich problems, problems that can only be solved through the use of considerable amounts of relevant knowledge. These are typically the ones that we address or deal with in academia. Once you've got experience in most of your jobs afterwards, these are the kind of things that you're going to be dealing with. So where you're trying to apply a vast existing knowledge base to solve the current problem. Some examples in academia: if you were to try and answer the question, do extroverts learn more strongly from rewarding or punishing stimuli? In order to answer that question, you need a really vast understanding of where does the personality trait extroversion come from, neurologically, what is it underpinned by? So we know that it's underpinned by differences in dopaminergic functioning. We know that dopamine is associated with reward processing, and you can apply that knowledge to try and answer the question. But without that knowledge, you can't really tackle a problem such as this. Another example: what teaching signal does the brain use to learn motor skills? Unless you have a really strong understanding of the background of motor learning, you can't really tackle that. We also have knowledge-lean problems that assume no real expertise. So problems that can be solved without the use of prior knowledge, because most of the necessary information is provided by the problem statement. So this might be problems that you come across, such as how do you get a certain number of orcs and hobbits across a bridge in X number of goes. And in these kinds of problems, you have different parameters that they might specify all of the constraints that you have. And in those examples, you're not needing to bring anything else to the table. As long as you've got a decent understanding of the concept of what orcs and hobbits are, you can understand that problem in isolation. So we have well-defined, ill-defined problems, knowledge-rich, knowledge-lean problems. These are both independent of each other, so you can have any combination of these. And one of the things that we'll come across in most of the examples that I give you is in psychology research, most of the time we're studying knowledge-lean, well-defined problems. And the reason that we're doing this is just simply it's much easier to study people's ability to do this. So there's only a handful of people that you could study their performance on knowledge-rich problems, and their performance is going to be influenced by how much knowledge they have. So people with lots of knowledge will perform well, people with little knowledge would perform poorly. It's also the case when you've got these well-defined problems that there is also typically an optimal strategy or an optimal solution to them. So if you're thinking about how do you move orcs and hobbits across a bridge, the optimal strategy would involve the least number of moves that you need to accomplish this solution in. So there's a real solution or real optimal solution that you can judge people's performance by. Okay, and finally we can think about some of the explicit stages that are involved in problem solving. So things really kick off at the start with this preparation phase where all we're doing is just trying to understand that a problem exists. We're evaluating each of those different parts of the problem so we understand what the constraints are. We know what the current initial state is, we understand what the eventual goal is, and through doing this you can work out whether this is a well-defined or an ill-defined problem. So if we think of the example of the person just trying to move the character along in limbo, this preparation stage is basically you working out what is the current problem in this situation. So we'll be working out that there's a blade that's potentially about to swing down and hit our character, and we're working out what is it that we need to solve or need to achieve here. In the production stage, you would then start trying to generate or think about possible solutions. So typically that could be through doing some kind of rehearsal or using some kind of problem-solving strategy. I'm going to come on to these in the next part, but it could be using something such as hill climbing or means end analysis. Very kind of heuristics or shortcut strategies could be employed. In the third stage, we judge or evaluate the success or the plausibility of these different solutions that we've come up with. So what's the likelihood of them succeeding? And if you don't think that there's a correct solution, it might be the case that we give up and stop working on the problem. Or alternatively, and again this probably depends on our disposition, so individual differences in how much we care about persisting towards stuff. So you could give up, or you could continue spending time trying to find alternative solutions. Now if you have given up, stage number 4 of incubation is where we step away from the problem, so we're no longer trying to explicitly or kind of consciously search for these solutions, and once you step away from that problem, there seems to be the case that there is some level of implicit processing, or there might be some level of kind of spreading activation that occurs, so that at some point when you return to the problem, the solution might seem evident, or it might seem much clearer. So if you ever get that feeling that you're trying to solve or trying to understand something, and then you're in the shower or you're somewhere totally unrelated or a couple of days later, and it just suddenly comes to your mind what would be a good solution to that problem, this is generally thought to occur through this incubation.